Do you feel like you're paying too much in taxes every year, or have a relationship with your current CPA where you only meet them once or just before tax time? Look, I want you to know that there is another solution to paying less in taxes and keeping more of your money. Valard Advisors is a leading fractional CFO and CPA firm that specializes in advanced tax strategies for founders, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Valard Advisors can help you navigate the complexity of business taxes and ensure that you're paying the least amount in tax possible. But this is far more than tax preparation. This is strategy. This is really getting into the data-driven decisions that your business needs to make in order to develop a long-term strategy that aligns for your business and personal goals. Whether you're looking to minimize tax liability, maximize your deductions, or plan for your financial future, Valard Advisors has the expertise and experience to help you get there. Do not wait until tax season. Work with professionals today. Contact Valard Advisors to schedule a consultation. Someone else was trying to influence or persuade, maybe even a sales conversation. Some of the things you think about the way your brain works when you're working with a jury trial.
I want the jurors to know that I'm the most prepared, both with the facts, my control of my questions, vocabulary, and then two things. I want to be the most credible and I want to be the most liked.
Welcome to Generation Wealth. I'm Candy Valentino, and I've been building businesses and generating wealth before I could legally order a drink. For more than 2 decades, I've built, scaled, acquired, and exited businesses, all while investing in real estate and building financial freedom. Now I want to help you expand your wealth and give you the proven roadmap to implement today. It doesn't matter if you're a part of Generation X, Generation Y, or Gen Z. It is time to join Generation Wealth. Now let's get started. All right, guys, I am so excited to welcome David Bruno to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Candy. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have this conversation because I think it's so interesting, your evolution of being a prosecutor, being on all this national media as an expert and really getting to know more about your story, because I know you've really evolved so much in these last few years as a business owner, not just an attorney. So I'd love to take back to what kind of got you into law in the first place and what kind of got you here today?
Great questions. And thank you again for having me. It's such a pleasure. You were on our show, Nothing But the Truth podcast, and It's full circle. So thanks for having me on. So look, where it all starts for me, the roots, I come from a blue collar family. My father, similar to your father, he was a mechanic. He had the used car business and never went to college. My mother, she never went to college either. She came from the inner city of Newark, New Jersey, and literally just blue collar the whole way, grinding it out. And that's really where I get my grit, my hard work, my will. And I couple that with my wrestling background. And I was lucky enough to have one of the best wrestlers on my show on Saturday, Pat Glory. He just won the NCAA tournament at 125 from Princeton University. Wow. And we talked a lot about that sport and what it teaches you about hard work and grit and will. And literally when I was in high school, I had to cut weight. And that's where I learned sacrifice. And I think in the end, we could fast forward to where I am now, but that sacrifice, that hard work, that grit, that will that I learned very early on took me to where I am now. I mean, when you have to lose weight, when you have to stay up all night, when you have to put garbage bags on and do a treadmill, you learn that quality, that skill set is something that really took me through being an attorney too. Because when you have a trial and you need to prepare for a cross-examination, it may take all night preparing. It may take, whatever it is you need to do. Yeah. I'll give you an example. Just this past St. Patrick's Day, man, I love St. Patrick's Day like everybody else. I go out, with the family, with the friends, with my staff, and literally I had a deadline that had to be met. And I had to do something for a certification that I have with the New Jersey Supreme Court. I'm a certified criminal trial attorney, and I was up for recertification. And unfortunately, I procrastinated that task. It came down to the St. Patrick's Day deadline, and I literally had to work all day, all the way up until 8 p.m. And that's just an example of that hard work, that grit, that sacrifice, and you need to do whatever it is you need to do to sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I go through Seton Hall University. I was a finance major in a very bad market, and there weren't many jobs. And that's where I started to look at alternatives. And I ran into mentor number one, Ed Bianchi. Ed Bianchi was a former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, kicking butt in the courts and loving his life, and really took me under his wing to show me the route. And that's what I always wanted to be, a prosecutor. From what I saw from Ed, he was a federal prosecutor, he's a homicide prosecutor. I was like, that's the route I want to take. And I went to law school. But you know what? At that point, I didn't have the best grades. I had not really prioritized my education at that point, and it was coming into a bad market with no jobs. And literally all the applications went out, and it was rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. One school accepted me. It was down in Miami Lakes, Florida. Okay. And that was the route I took. I went down there with my mother, and we took a look at places, and my parents ended up buying an investment property for me right there. And I go down to Florida for law school year number one. And the best thing that happened to me was a change in environment. I went down there, and my community was law students. That's it. I didn't have any distractions whatsoever. So that was a huge change that I think I needed. I need to get away from the friends. I need to get away from all those distractions. And I finally, for the first time in my life, started to focus on education. And I got great grades. And then I wanted to come back. And again, transfer application. It was rejection after rejection after rejection. One school, New York Law School in Manhattan, downtown on Worth, and really came back and then started to get my roots into the state that I grew up in the state that I'm living in. So Bianchi, same mentor, gives me my first job. And then I run into my now law partner, Bob Bianchi. That's mentor number two. And I think it's so important in my life to point to these mentors that I have. But Bianchi, he and his dad get retained by a doctor that also retained me and Ed Bianchi. So that's like the dream team, so to speak, the four of us grinding it out. And I think that at that point, my law partner now, Bianchi, noticed the grit, the grind, the hard work. Little did I know that right then and there, Bianchi, mentor number two, was being vetted for the county prosecutor's job, the head prosecutor in the town that I lived in, that grew up in. And yeah, he was appointed by the governor, and there was a place for me there. So that's where I go into the prosecutor's office. And again, hard work, grit, and will, staying after, getting there early, doing whatever anybody wanted to do, which positioned me into the homicide unit. At a very young age, I was going out to crime scenes. I was working with detectives and lieutenants and captains, and literally a young lawyer on these scenes. So that's where I was able to get my experience. I was there for 6 years. I tried a number of homicide cases. I was a part of the investigations, applying for search warrants with judges, getting on my feet in front of juries and trying cases in 6 years. And then Bianchi and I left the prosecutor's office. We opened up the Bianchi Law Group over 10 years ago. And that's where we're at now. We're a criminal defense, domestic violence law firm in New Jersey. We do high-end stuff, and we do good work.
That's awesome.
But Bianchi and Bruno, that's it from 2013 to 2020. All right, 7 years of grinding it out. It was just the two of us, and what happened, the change that had to be made for our operations was COVID. And I talk about COVID in 2020. I got 2020 vision from 2020, because literally New Jersey and the Northeast and a lot of states can relate to this, but they shut down the courts. Literally, governor's order comes down. All courthouses shut down. All citizens are quarantined. Now, for a service industry, when you represent people that are in trouble, helping them through their worst spot, going to court with no courts to go in, and in fact, no people were even leaving their homes, so there weren't any calls coming into the office, we had to completely reevaluate the business.
Well, and just for anyone that doesn't know, because of not being in the industry, what I don't think a lot of people understand, unless you have that inside knowledge, was the courts weren't prepared for this at all. Like, I feel like business really quickly evolved to like, let's jump on Zoom and let's do all of this. But the government agencies were really lacking. Like, it wasn't until far into COVID with all the restrictions that they finally say, well, let's try to have court via Zoom, and then you have judges and attorneys trying to try cases over Zoom, which is virtually impossible. And now how do you have jury trials? And so I think that's important context, that like, people that are in business think, oh, well, didn't you just jump into Zoom? It took forever for the courts to try to figure that out and to try to have some semblance of arraignments and doing all of that stuff via Zoom. So I can't imagine the craziness of just going through all of that you guys had to navigate through.
Yeah, I've tried cases over Zoom, Candy. Yeah. Literally, and it's super difficult. Share screen, you're like sharing your screen, and you got to show like demonstrative exhibits and authenticate things. I mean, it's a complete nightmare.
Well, I think the one court case that went viral around that time was the judge. I'm sure you've seen it, where it was trying the case, and the attorney had the cat filter on his Zoom, and he's like trying to be all serious with the judge, and he's like, no, I promise I'm not a cat. It's like, how do you even maintain order after something like that happens? Or pulling up some of the graphic stuff in a homicide on a share screen. I mean, that's just, it's crazy what you guys had to go through.
Still catching up too, Candy. I mean, these courts are backlogged. I mean, there are defendants that are sitting in jail that still need trials.
Yeah. Because
you couldn't do jury trials over Zoom. There was no ability to do serious criminal trials in front of juries without bringing people in, right? So back then, March, April, May, I was on trial when the order came down. Literally, I had a jury out that was deliberating on my client's case. And there was a standing order that you couldn't have more than 10 people in a room together. And I made the argument, Judge, the motion for mistrial. We have 12 jurors deliberating on my client's freedom. And the standing order is you can't have more than 10 in a room. Yeah. I wouldn't want these people to rush a judgment, rush a verdict just to get out of the room.
What happened?
Ended up working out for me and my client there. There was no verdict. There was a mistrial and it all worked out.
Wow.
But from a business perspective, went home to no leads, no phone calls, no court. I mean, we had to do something. So Bob Bianchi, my law partner, calls me up. And he's like, we got this webinar. Let's jump on this webinar. It's like 5 days and it's like 3 hours. And it's like, all right, let's give it a shot. And the webinar was about business plans and KPIs, key performance indicators, and standard operating procedures, and understanding revenue and expenses and budgets for the first time. We didn't have any of that. We didn't know how many leads we had. We didn't know our conversion rates. We didn't have any KPIs. Okay, so now we look back on the last 7 years, and the thing that we saw was every year it's the same. Generally speaking, with one outlier, revenue was the same, expenses were the same, no growth, 0% growth, literally.
Well, and then you have this market shift, right? And this is what I think a lot of people, especially I see it at attorneys, doctors, like super educated, really smart, sharp, brilliant people in their field, right? And they don't realize that you can be the best litigator or the best prosecutor or the best defense attorney, whichever. And if you don't understand the business mechanism, you're going to be a solo practitioner forever. And then if you don't build that business, that machine that you can measure all of that and actually be able to know what levers to move to grow the practice, you always are open up to risk, which is basically what happened in 2020 for you guys. It made you hyper aware of like, oh my gosh, we don't even know how to get more business in the door once it's stopped, because if you don't measure how those people are coming, you don't know how to go get more of them. So can you maybe
absolutely
just talk a little bit about, I mean, I know that was probably, you had a lot of leverage, right? Oftentimes when they realize, oh, I need to do this, their business is still going well. So they don't stop and say, okay, let me learn these things. Can you talk, aside from like webinars and stuff, what were some of the things that you realized, wow, we really need to measure these specific KPIs for our business?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we were doing great. Don't get me wrong. Sure. I mean, Bob and I had been on television since 2015. I made my national television debut on Christmas Eve, 2015. Another example. Who wants to go on television Christmas Eve? This guy. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go on Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, any holiday. You call me. I never said no. And I think that's why I've been so successful in getting on television regularly. I have a regular weekly spot on Core TV. I have a regular spot on Fox News. And as needed, people call me because they know I say yes. Mm-hmm. They know I'm dependable. Yeah. But we had done that well. So yeah, we were positioned well, but being a great lawyer doesn't mean you're a great businessman. Mm-hmm. And literally there were other law firms, respectfully, not as good as our firm, not with the credentials that we have, that were better marketers than we were. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what happens is then the clients, the people looking for lawyers, they only see a certain segment when the real trial lawyers, the ones that are great in the courtroom, don't know marketing. So we had to leverage that very quickly. We had to use our unique selling propositions that we have. We're a team of former prosecutors. We're up to 7 now. I'll give you a little hint where we went. But 7 lawyers now, former prosecutors. We have a team approach. We're in the media, right? So now we're starting to use these unique selling propositions to get more eyeballs on our services. At that point, we hadn't done any Google reviews either. I mean, that's critical. Every person that calls this firm right now is like, wow, the reviews are exceptional. They read them all. And we didn't even have them, right? So it's almost like if you have that foundation, especially if you have good quality, especially if you have good services, and you start to douse the gasoline, the fuel on that, and get more eyeballs and impressions, that is how you start to grow and convert. Candy, you could have the greatest marketing in the world. If you don't have the sales lined up ready to rip and roar, it's going to fail. You know how many times we've broken this model before with all of the leads coming in without the intake specialists or the sales attorney. And yeah, so you have to have it all.
I think this applies to everyone listening, because sometimes people think, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me. He's an attorney. No, what you just said applies to everyone. You can be the very best, the most skilled, the most credentialed. You can do it better than anybody else. But if you can't market to the audience that needs your services, you will get left in the dust, or you just won't grow to the level that you can. And every single one of those people, because you're not learning how to market and how to get in front of them, they're actually getting subpar service than what you can offer them. So I just want to touch on that because I think everyone listening can learn something from that. And the other thing is the testimonial part. Like I have talked to massive CMOs of Chipotle and Nike and so many others that are existing CMOs. And they're like, the one thing that can settle the score for everyone is testimonials. Like getting your customers to sell for you instead of you trying to sell to them. It'll shorten your sales cycle and your conversion. So I love that you talked about that. And if you're willing, is there anything you specifically do like in process to capture some of those testimonials? Do you have someone that reaches out? Like how do you, because that's something you have to focus on if you want a lot of them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, one of the things that we did, we put an operation into place similar to the book Traction.
Okay.
Traction is setting up 90-day, working in quarters, setting up 90-day goals, and also sharing them with the team. So everybody is aware of what's going on. So essentially what we did is we made Google reviews a goal, a KPI, something that is regularly reviewed both in our weekly meetings as well as our quarterly meetings. All right. So when you feel something is important, right? The key, set up systems in place to make sure that everybody is understanding of what needs to happen, and then attach a KPI, a key performance indicator, to the particular goal that could be reviewed by the team or the person assigned that particular task. And that is essentially what we did. And then it's also setting up that process after a case is closed in our office. That is part of the closeout process.
Love it.
You know, certain things have to happen when you're an attorney. You have to close out the case. You have to send a letter. And then one of the things that we do is follow up with the Google reviews. So it's automated at this point. And one of our paralegals is responsible for that. She knows what to do when the closeouts happen. And that's how we start to keep on adding to those Google reviews.
That's awesome. I love that. I just wanted everyone to be able to grab that little tangible piece. Now, right when I cut you off to go back to that, you were starting to say 3 things. Do you remember what you were saying?
3 parts to the business, as I see it. All right. Number 1, marketing. Number 2, sales. Number 3, operations. That's how it is in the law office. I think you could take those 3 parts to pretty much every business. That operations is interchangeable. That could be a dentist office, a physician's office. That could be a construction company, whatever it is. But you need the marketing and you need the sales to get to the operations. And like I said, if you have the best marketing and your sales fails, well, you're going to go down the drain. Also, operations needs to be able to perform and get those Google reviews so that you can get more business in the market. It's like this cycle of marketing, sales, and operations over and over and over again. Rinse and repeat, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once you go to scale, there's a 4th in there when you really want to blow it up, which is leadership. Because that leadership piece, if you will only grow as much, your business will only grow as much as you do. So if you're not constantly getting new mentors, putting yourself in new communities, getting yourself in bigger rooms, you tend to put a glass ceiling on your ability to get even bigger because we don't know what we don't know, right? Like if you were to look back and talk to little David and be like, hey, listen to this, buddy. Like we're on Fox News and we're on Court TV and we have 7 attorneys and we have this massive firm and we're in the top in the nation. He'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. And in 10 years from now, when you look back, it's like if you don't evolve and increase that leadership, that kind of puts a limit on the ability. And I know you've mentioned this, and I want to just chat a little bit about like how important has that been? You mentioned mentors before and, how that's evolved and just in 2020. And I think you said last year, you kind of got exposed to Ed Milet and some of that and that whole world. How has that helped you continually break through your own glass ceiling and continue to grow?
Yeah, sure. Personal development, right? It's great. I'm a trial lawyer. I do great work in the courtroom, but there's more to life than just business. There's body, mentally and physically. There's being spiritually. There's the relationships that we have in our lives, right? So I end up in San Diego on June 2nd of 2022, last year. And I was there for a marketing event. All right, because that's really what was going on from COVID to growth is marketing, especially my role in the firm. What I'm doing is I'm head of marketing, my law partner is head of sales, and then we both supervise operations. So I'm constantly growing, learning lead magnets and landing pages and email sequences and all the great things that I'm learning over the last 2 years. And literally, I'm out in San Diego for a marketing event. And I'm in Petco Park. And the person putting it on, Billie Jean is marketing, had guests. He had Dean Graciosi. He had Ed Milet. He had Damon John. All right. And Ed came on last. It was late. It was dark in Petco Stadium with the lights and everything like that. And I had heard of him before because he had the book coming out, The Power of One More. And he gave that speech on stage. And literally, I connected with the things he was saying. You know, he talks a lot about his father and them loving the game of golf. And that's the best time going out there with his father. And that's the same with me and my dad. You know, he talked about the way he does about his son, Max, and his daughter. And I have a son and a daughter as well. And his father, how he got through and became sober. And by the way, his dad's sobriety date is my birthday, 4/20. Wow. And literally, he's talking about his dad in his speech. And he's showing pictures of his father being brought back to his home on his last day. and being with his dad, and everybody's crying and I'm in tears myself. And he says that, my nephew's out there and the nephew's right in front of me. And literally he grabbed his friend and I'm there and I'm crying and I'm like, are you the nephew? He's like, I'm the nephew. And, it's like literally that plane ride home from California to New Jersey, I listened to Max Out, his book, took notes, started, then it was The Power of One More. When that came out, I listened to that as well. And then I ended up in Ed Milet's podcasts. And I'll tell you what, he is my number one. And every guest he brings on, it's an hour conversation, bringing out the best in people.
Yeah.
And then I just started to listen to all of his podcasts with Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi and Brendan Burchard and John Gordon, another one of my top guys that I listen to. And you, literally, that I come across Candy Valentino. And that's how we've come into contact.
Yeah.
It's through these associations, this transformation that I had through Ed Milet's podcasts. And it's really brought me to a place of balance. It's business is important. Don't get me wrong. But also I have habits and routines. I work out every day. I have relationships that I work on, my family, so that has made me so much more well-rounded. It's ironic. I'm sitting in Petco Park, San Diego for marketing, and I come across somebody that I look up to now that literally gives me content instead of television, sports, distractions, social media. I am now listening to audiobooks, to podcasts. That's my space where I'm at, Candy.
So important.
And I really look back on that night as being transformational.
That's awesome. And it's so important to anyone listening too. If you don't have the funds yet, if you don't have the wealth yet that you can jump on a plane and do some of the events or pay to be in a high level group, just like you were sharing, audiobooks, podcast episodes like this, there's so many free pieces of information out there that are truly transformational. I think what happens though is because people don't have to pay for it, they sometimes don't value it. Where the information is truly will change your life if you value it and apply it. The difference of someone else that maybe sat in Petco Park, the difference between them and you, David, is you went on that plane and you immediately implemented. There are a lot of people that hear something and they love the idea of it, but they don't create change. And really that idea isn't going to change your life. It's the action that you take to implement it that will. And that's what you've done so beautifully. And I just want to thank you for sharing that, because so often people hear it and don't do anything with it. And then they're frustrated why their life isn't any different. And here you've been on a quest for the last year and a half, 2 years, that you are just constantly and never ending trying to improve in every single aspect of your life. And it's inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what we learned from COVID. I mean, there's not many boundaries anymore.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of content out there. You could start with the free content, like your podcast and Ed's podcast. Look, you listen to the both of you, you're not selling anything.
Nope.
Literally, there's no motivation to here's the upsell, go to there, right? No, it's really making an impact. You guys are making an impact. Right? And just back to the marketing piece to it too. It's not about generating revenue alone. That's great. When you scale your business, when you earn more revenue, when you're able to do more things, it's one thing. The other thing is impact. As you grow, as you get more impressions, as you get more eyeballs, as people follow your message, you are able to help more people. And that's what Bob loves about the scaling of the law practice too. I mean, he's old school. His dad is in his 80s, still a lawyer. And back in the day, there was no marketing or advertising for the lawyer profession, the legal profession. It was almost looked down upon. Mm-hmm. Well, nowadays, we have learned that the ability to scale has led to the ability to help more people with the premium services that we offer too. Get them away from the subpar attorneys into what we believe is the best. And that's the beauty of the scaling as well. revenue, and impact.
I love that. And this is totally kind of maybe off topic, but I can't let the interview end without asking you this, because I always find jury trial attorneys have a uniqueness that very few people have. They can develop it, but they don't naturally have it. And that is how to persuade and influence 12 people to think and believe your way, right? Like that is massive pressure, massive stress, because it is a life or death situation on the line. It's not like you're just trying to persuade them to buy this tchotchke thing that you're selling or to provide a service. You're trying to influence 12 people to believe what you're saying about your side of this situation. Is there something that you maybe can share with us of how you perceive that situation? Maybe some skills that if someone else was trying to influence or persuade, maybe even a sales conversation, some of the things you think about the way your brain works when you're working with a jury trial?
Oh, I love it. I mean, look, there's two roles. Where I'm at, it's an adversarial process. The only way a criminal justice system works is when you have a prosecutor representing the government who has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have a defense attorney that's representing the accused that has to convince the jury that the prosecutor hasn't met their burden, okay? So the success right there starts with preparation. I want to be the most prepared individual in the courtroom. I want the jurors to know that I'm the most prepared, both with the facts, my control of my questions, vocabulary, right? And then two things. I want to be the most credible in the courtroom, and I want to be the most liked in the courtroom. And that starts with the preparation. You need to know what you're talking about factually. Oftentimes when I do cross-examinations or I put on cases, I know the facts better than the parties themselves. And they lived it. But you know what? They probably haven't worked as hard as I have about reviewing the text messages and going over all the discoveries. And I have a system for how I get back to things. I have a numbering system with all the pages and kind of like a cheat sheet, page 8, line 15. I know how to get to stuff. So I think that comes across, number one, is being prepared, but also being credible. Not making bad arguments that are not believable. When you make an objection to the court, know the law, do it sternly. I'm on court TV regularly. I'll be on later today. And I watch some of these trials when an attorney makes an objection, objection. No, believe in it. Stand up, objection, Your Honor, hearsay, objection, irrelevant, whatever it is. But you want to be a source of credibility. And also just know you're being watched, especially in a courtroom. You're being watched. And it's on a sales call. It's on an event you're speaking at, whatever. So always be control of your emotions, be control of your actions, be control of what you're communicating.
I love that. It's also too the conviction you have. Even just when you were talking about it now, I could feel the passion and the emotion, the conviction. And when you have 12 people watching, because they watch every move, right? Whether you feel, are you arrogant? Are you dismissive? Can they trust you? It's just so fascinating. If no one's ever done this, to just even go watch you on court TV and all of the stuff that you talk about, because I think it's fascinating that there is such an art there, and you really need both attorneys to do their part in order for justice to be found. And so I think that that's what's really cool. And with the law side, I know you're working on some really awesome stuff. Can you share a little bit about what you're putting on this workshop and how people can find out more about it?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. My law partner and I, Bob, have created a 5-week workshop for students that are interested in careers in law. So high school students, college students, law school students. Bob is 18 years my senior. He's got great experience and he's on national television as well. I think between the two of us, we're over 1,000 appearances. And we did have a very similar program when we were prosecutors. Like I said, Bob was the head county prosecutor. He was the boss. So we had this community affairs services, this unit that actually put on a similar course for students. And then we translated that into the private practice. And we did that and we started that in 2016. And we've had classes before. We were up to 12 participating universities in the state of New Jersey that would send students, and Bob and I would go into one of the colleges and we'd have a classroom and we put on this course. And we bring in other attorneys so that students can hear about criminal or family law, employment law, entertainment law. We bring in all of these different areas of practice to talk to students that may not know which direction they want to go in. We talk about interviewing and resume building and networking, and there's a graduation. And again, another thing we learned from COVID is the ability to do this digitally. And that's what we are doing. We're taking everything that we did in the brick and mortar place, and we've put together a 5-week course. It's going to be over Zoom. We're going to have a Facebook group where everybody can network and talk, and it's awesome. I cannot wait to do this. It's iwanttobea.lawyer.law. And I know a lot of people here that are listening to us have kids, have children, right? And if they're interested, they don't know what to do, especially if they're interested in being a lawyer. There are so many lawyers out there, and the competition is fierce. So these are the types of extra steps to go through to really, number one, learn other areas of law, start listening to the cadence of what we're going to present. We're also going to dip into a trial where they could watch a trial and we'll comment on the trial. So I'm really, really looking forward to that.
I think even for kids, it's so valuable that even if you don't know that they want to be a lawyer, how cool would it be for them to do that on the last few weeks of their school vacation, their summer vacation, and just to learn more about it, because you never know. I know Anthony actually was going to psychology, I believe was his pre-law degree. And same thing, I think Johnny Cochran, it was like around the OJ time, they came in and did, this class workshop in person, if you will. And it was through that he was like, I want to be a lawyer. And just changed everything from psychology to law. So I think it's just interesting. You never know whether it's a kid in high school or somebody already in college.
Can I add too? I'm a business finance major.
Oh, get out.
Seton Hall business finance major. And when I went into law school too, it was either criminal justice, it could have been corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, literally. So even me, I was lucky because I had that mentor that was guiding me and showing me. And I didn't have many other options at the time. But literally for students that are interested in law, there are so many areas of law that we want to give them experience with to hear from so that they can make an educated decision. Law school is anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 nowadays.
Yeah.
And Candy, in Wealth Habits, I know you have that excellent chapter on opportunity cost. And literally how the college education or law school education can be money that's invested in other places. So that would be a terrible mistake to go into law school and not really know that you want to do it with the investment of all that money into the schooling and then transition into something else. I know plenty of people that went to law school and they're not even lawyers.
Me too.
Right. So this resource can help people, make that decision before you go and drop that investment in that way.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. So we'll link all that up for everyone. And we always end the show with one final question. I know you've got Court TV to go to, so we'll go ahead and bring the question up. But the name of the show obviously is Generation Wealth. And I believe that at every stage, every industry, every entrepreneur or professional has a different definition of that. And sometimes it changes over the years. So as we are here today, what does the definition of wealth mean to you?
Wealth means to me, it means freedom. The freedom to do what I want with the people I want to do it with. And I have 2 young children, Madison and Mason, and I want to set them up in their future as well. But I also agree with something you said with Ed, and that is also teaching them the value of the dollar, the value of what expenses are and how to make things meet and live within your means. So I would hate for them to see all the success that I have made and my wife and I, the things that we put together and the things that we give them, for them not to understand the hard work and the grit that goes into it, that sacrifice that I talked about in the beginning. I think that's what wealth means to me. It's the ability to be free, to do what you want with the people that you want, and also build up that generational wealth, which is teaching Madison and Mason how to do it themselves.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so great seeing you and chatting with you today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It was great seeing you too. Thanks for having me.
And don't forget that if you didn't buy a copy yet of Wealth Habits, it is now available on Audible. And thank you so much for all of your support, because we are #1 bestseller, new release in multiple categories. And of course, if you already have a copy of the book and downloaded it and listened to the book, please consider leaving a 5-star review over on Amazon. It would mean the world to me, as well as many other readers that need this information. Okay, guys, that's it for today. We'll see you next time on Generation Wealth.